Yo, what is up guys? It is Bumfris, back with episode 56 of our Reddit series. This one's going to be a little bit more entitled parents, and I know you're going to love this one. I found some really good and really fresh stories for today's episode, so I have a feeling this is going to be a really good episode. That all being said, I'm pretty excited to get into this video, and you know what you need to do. It's just sit back, relax, and get annoyed at some entitled parents. Alright, first things first. I'm a 17-year-old German male, so apologies in advance for any spelling mistakes. 7 months shy of 18 and making a living as an independent programmer, mostly regarding server security. I write and distribute programs on my own, and sometimes companies hire me to take a look at their firewalls and work out weak points that either I or a third party then fixes. Whenever that happens, I first have a meeting with the CEO discussing the details of the project and my hourly rate. Then I make an estimate for material costs and such, and once that's out of the way, I have my lawyer set up a contract. My lawyer is quite expensive as he's a Harvard-educated corporate lawyer, but it's definitely worth it because quite frankly, he's an effing beast. We're on a first name basis and get along pretty well. So I'm waiting outside of my lawyer's office with about 20 minutes spare time. So I grab a coffee on the way and started reading this book that I brought along. The guy that's inside my lawyer's office is yelling about his divorce and how he wouldn't lose his house and assets to his ex-wife. To be honest, I can agree with that to some degree. After about 25 minutes of yelling, coming out of the room, my lawyer practically shoves this guy out of his office, saw me sitting there and said, "Hey, sorry for making you wait." And the guy looks at me and says, "You're gonna shove me out of your office for some bratty kid with rich parents that effed something up?" Remind you, he's a corporate lawyer with a main focus on finance law. I ignore the guy and say to my lawyer using his first name, "Hey, no problem." The guy was a bit shocked about me and my lawyer being on a first name basis. Then he went, "So you F things up on a daily, huh?" At this point, my lawyer steps in and says, "Sir, that bratty kid, as you put it, makes me twice the money that you make me. I also won't tolerate this kind of behavior towards my other clients, and I would advise you to get out of the building before I call security." The guy, seemingly angry, stares at me and then leaves. My lawyer apologized for this guy's behavior and told me that he has been thinking about dropping him as a client as he's been rude to both him and other clients in the past. This was the nail in the coffin apparently. I later found out that since my lawyer dropped him as a client, he lost his divorce settlement and got off pretty badly. I guess that's karma. I just can't see what this guy thought the benefit was of trash talking his lawyer and his clients. Like if I was going through that situation and I was trying really hard to make sure I didn't lose my own assets and my property and whatever else, I would be doing everything I can to get my lawyer 100% on my side so that he fights as hard as he can for me. I guess some people are so entitled they can't stop themselves from putting other people down for their own benefit. So before I get into this one, we're going to run this one in night mode just to see what it looks like, so make sure to leave some feedback for me below. Right, so in my last post, I told you all of a mum who thought I should be put in special ed simply for being autistic. In order to do this, she spread lies about me being a violent sociopath who beat up her kid Julie, who was my best friend at the time. If you would like to see that story, it was in my last video, which I'll put a link to in the pinned comment. But she was caught in the lie and was left alone fuming over failing to get me booted into special ed. Well, she tried almost the exact same thing 6 years later, but even worse, and this time it ended very badly for her. Also, obligatory phone excuse, and I have tendencies to digress. This will probably be a long one. Some extra backstory as well. In the years since she was caught in the lie, she has gotten a divorce, and I'd like to believe it was because of what she did to me, but well, it's more likely it was just part of their issues that their marriage faced. She has kept trying to lobby to have me removed and has even tried to remove her daughter from the school, and I heard from Julie that she actually claimed that she had more right to Julie because she was the mum and was promptly told that's not how shared custody works, and she failed in all these attempts. It became so bad that the school asked my parents, who are both divorced, and myself if she should be banned from parent meetings and such. My dad might not have been the best dad growing up, but he was protective of me and did teach me some good lessons on how to be a good man. He didn't want her anywhere near me. My mum was gracious and said she had a right to know about her daughter's education, and my mum taught me her grace, so I was cool too. None of this made me rethink her actions, by the way. Anyway, onto the story. This was during the time where I was taking this course in regards to my sensory and balance difficulties. I was 12 years old now and I'm not a tall boy, but I am a big boy. I'm outside of the place where I had my class waiting for a taxi to pick me up. A quick side note, I'm in the bad part of town, and in Denmark, much like in the US, there's white people emulating the accent, style, and slang of inner city African Americans. In Denmark, our version is Middle Eastern people, mostly Turks, and white people emulating them. This will be important to the story. While waiting, I get accosted by a girl gang. You read that right, we actually had trouble with girl gangs in my area, made up of Middle Eastern teen leader and her sidekicks 1, 2, and 3. Ages were probably 14 to 16. They start out chanting with derogatory names like fat pig and Danish crap, and keep in mind the three of them are white and Danish. When I don't respond to them, they get close, blowing their cigarette smoke in my face, pushing me around and starting to back me up against a wall. I am of course very uncomfortable with this, but I say nothing. It's 4 against 1 and they're girls. I'm a boy. My dad taught me never to hit a woman. I try to get away from them, but that's when their ringleader pulls a knife on me, and I freeze, then they begin burning me with their cigarettes. My dad might have taught me never to hit a woman, but he also taught me to defend myself if I felt threatened and/or for self-preservation. I had severe anger issues that I had conquered on my own, but right there, I saw red. I actually don't remember what I did, but I remember them running away screaming, and I had a cut on my arm and a knife in my leg. The taxi arrived to see them run away and me bleeding. He immediately gets me into the car, drives me to the hospital and calls my mum and dad on the way. I'm out again later that day. Wasn't that severe actually. It hit nothing vital and I barely felt any pain. Word travels fast of course, mostly because I'm bragging my ass off for managing to fight off 4 people older than me, who had a knife and somehow survived. Our entitled parent hears this and this time twists and spins it to not only my class but multiple, both older and younger on the school and in the neighborhood, that I'm a violent sociopath, specifically targeting girls, and tries to build up support to have me arrested. Note, I've already talked to police at this point and the girl gang in question were in the middle of being processed. My actions deemed self-defense and I'm not in any kind of trouble. Now of course, not every parent of every class knows about me, but most of the kids in my class had older and younger siblings. Her lies are very quickly quelled and she is banned from the school property, and my mum's grace has been thrown out the window. My mum and dad agreed on very few things, being divorcees, but they did agree that the entitled parent deserved to get arrested for her lies and slander. The legal system agreed too. She pledged freedom of speech and was told that it didn't cover her lies and slander. I can't believe this guy left it on such a cliffhanger like that. Like, what actually happened to the entitled mum? He mentioned there's legal action and the courts agree, but at the end of the day, what actually happened? Did she get arrested? Was there actually some kind of compensation? Like, what happened? If you ever happen to watch this video, maybe leave a comment and let us know how it panned out. I mentioned this person, although not exact stories about her, in another post on another subreddit, and because of what I found out later about this particular entitled parent, I was encouraged to post it here. Also, the obligatory note that this story is from over 2 decades ago and things are half remembered and possibly embellished. So, I grew up in a very small town, about 1,500 people, and most of them were rural/farm people. The local elementary school had about 150 kids in it, tops. It's safe to say everyone knew everyone in this town, and they surely knew the woman that we're gonna call Susan for this story. Susan was famous for being an incredibly controlling and demanding person. She never had a job because she would be rude and demanding to her co-workers and customers, causing her to get fired or quit when she couldn't have her own way. As a result, she was mostly a stay-at-home mother of her only child, and she decided that if this was the case, she'd be the helicopter mum from hell. Susan's daughter, who we'll call E, was actually a really nice girl. In fact, she was my best friend one school year. Her mother, however, despised me and that fact, and once threatened to run me over if she ever saw me crossing the street alone, unless I stayed away from her daughter. My friend knew her mother was the reason that she didn't make or keep friends easily and tried to soldier on regardless, not even becoming really rebellious in her teen years. As for Susan's husband and my friend's father, no one in town knew much about him other than that he was a long-haul truck driver and rarely home. Cue the obvious jokes about him being gone so long to avoid his wife. This particular story happened around Halloween, like the title says. I was in 4th or 5th grade, so about 9 or 10 years old, and one of my classmates had his birthday the day before Halloween. So he enjoyed combining the holiday and his birthday and having a party for both, and would invite everyone in class. This year, his parents had decided to make it a big deal and even rented out the local garage hall so all of his classmates would have room to run around and play and have fun, with plans that afterwards that many of the kids, with their parents' permission accompanying them, would go in a costume to the town hall where a haunted house was hosted in the basement every year. The haunted house was an especially big deal for many of us since it would be the first time most of us who had permission would be old enough and be allowed to go, as it could be pretty intense for younger kids. So the night of the party comes and all of the kids show up in their costumes, leaving presents for the birthday boy. Susan shows up with her daughter and she of course insists on staying and helping. The birthday boy's mother didn't really think she needed help, but trying to argue with Susan would have resulted in causing a scene and probably ruining things for her daughter, as she would have needed to leave with her, so she thanked her for her help and let her stay. At some point during the party, Susan decided that they were running low on something or another, and it was vital to the party experience that there be more. She wouldn't leave the party to get it herself, even with the birthday boy's parents paying, however. No, she kept insisting that they go and she'd be supervising the party. For whatever reason, they agreed and left the party to her. I swear, no sooner than the birthday boy's parents were out the door that Susan decided to show us something to really fear. She started ordering us to stay away from certain tables, ordering us to play certain games, and if we didn't want to, she would physically grab us and force us into position. I was shy and unpopular and mostly there because everyone else was, and my mother thought that I should go if invited, and I actually tried to hide under a table from Susan. I can still remember her reaching under that table and dragging me out, tearing the wings of my fairy costume in the process. Susan took all of the fun out of the games with her demands for rigid structure and mandatory participation, and getting angry when any kid did anything off script, yelling at them to behave. I know the birthday boy spent years talking about Susan ruining his birthday that year, so I'm sure that he was mortified while this was going on. She had control of the party for probably a good 45 minutes because of the distance from our town to the nearest store that had what the parents needed to get, which was the majority of the party. By the time they came back, they could tell the mood of the party was dead and there was probably no saving it. They did cake and presents, handed out the goodie bags, and everyone got into groups or met up with their parents to walk to the haunted house. Of course, my friend wasn't allowed to go, and furthermore, Susan spent a lot of time trying to talk to other parents out of letting their own kids go too. I remember her going to my mother and trying to convince her that I was especially not ready, that I was too scared and fragile. My mother just dismissed her and took me to the haunted house. I don't remember that haunted house very well, but I do remember Susan yanking me out from under the table and that being the scariest thing that happened to me that night. What made me view this and all the other things Susan did in another light, and why E stood by her despite how controlling she was what came to light after I was an adult and my mother ran into her daughter working at a diner in a nearby town. She confessed to my mother that her father had been horrifically abusing her mother throughout her childhood, right up until adulthood. She honestly believed her mother's behaviour was an attempt to reclaim some control over her life and also protect her daughter. Once my friend was an adult, she finally felt able to leave her husband and her personality did a complete 180. My mother got me back in contact with my friend and I'm happy to say that Susan is a much better, happier person now. My friend has a child of her own after having some difficulties with fertility issues, and she is now a great mother and Susan is a great grandmother. I think sometimes it's nice for an entitled parent story to have a bit of a wholesome ending. They don't always tend to have them, so something like this is always nice to hear. I've made jokes in the past that entitled parents never learn or change, but I guess I've been proven wrong. Shortly after graduating high school and getting out of a bad relationship, S, being my girlfriend, made the first move and we started dating. Fast forward a few weeks when I was meeting entitled parent for the first time at their house. S had already told me that entitled parent was deeply religious, which wasn't a problem for me because I try to keep religion out of relationships. I've always considered myself a Christian agnostic. As I introduced myself, things seemed to be going fine. We had a nice dinner and we were getting along until the entitled parent suggested that we go to church together the following Sunday. Now normally I wouldn't mind and would be okay with going, but I had already made plans, so I politely declined. Big mistake. The entitled parent immediately starts questioning me and saying that I'm lying and I hate God and Jesus. Now, I've always tried to be honest, so I tell entitled parent that I'm agnostic, but that's not the reason, and that I actually do have plans, and S backs me up, as she already knew about the plans. This was clearly the wrong thing to say, because within a few minutes, the entitled parent was already telling me to leave and that I was forbidden from seeing S again. When I asked why, he replied with something along the lines of, I didn't spend all this time making sure S had a good Christian soul for you to ruin it. Being respectful and a guest, I don't reply or argue and just left. As I was walking home, S texts me saying that the entitled parent says if you convert, he'll give you his blessing. This is not going to happen. So for the next year and a half, S and I continued to date in secret until S moved out, which for some reason made entitled parent not have a problem with me anymore, and we actually did go to church together sometime after. Just note as well, this all took place about 3.5 years ago, so all the quotes aren't 100% accurate. I know with certain religions you do have to convert to be able to get married in that church obviously, but to have a conversation like this right off the bat seems a little bit excessive. Also on that note, I don't think the best way to convert someone into any religion is to shame and bully them, but that's just my opinion. Alright everyone, that is that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. Just so you're all aware, tomorrow's episode will be some nuclear revenge. If I can find a couple of people in there that line up with Entitled Parents as well, it could make for an exciting episode, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. And also don't forget to follow me on both Twitter and Instagram. They are both at Bumfris, but I'll also pop them in the pinned comment if it's easier for you just to copy them over. But otherwise, I am going to wrap things up there. I just want to say again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I'll see you all tomorrow for another Reddit video. Bye.